Hello, thank you for joining in. I'm Nivedna Prabhu and you are watching VNN Canada. The new coronavirus, officially named COVID-19, is thought to have jumped to a human from a yet-to-be identified animal host. Similar to other coronaviruses, such as those that cause the common cold and severe acute respiratory syndrome, which is better known as SARS, the new virus causes respiratory disease. Now, even though the coronavirus disease that has sickened tens of thousands of people in China is new to science, doctors have a pretty good idea about how to treat it. Now, on the other hand, doctors see similar symptoms from other diseases all the time, especially from serious cases of the flu. Now, today in the studios, I'm joined in by Dr. Azad Kaushik, who's a renowned immunologist. Thank you so much for joining us.
Nice.
It's a pleasure having you in our studios, and thank you for taking the time out to talk about coronavirus and, of course, everything related to the virus that has been creating so much of news and also at some point a little bit of fear amongst people. Before we get into the details about it and, of course, the case and everything related to the virus, I think most people want to know, what is the virus about, for starters?
Okay, Vedna, yes, I do understand that there is a lot of fear factor in the community about coronavirus. Many people I know have canceled their trips and so on. Well, let me tell you that, you see, viruses are normally present all around us. They are in our body as well. Some are harmful viruses and some are not harmful viruses. Now, you see that one of the things that I like to say about viruses is it is something, a kind of interface between a living and a non-living thing. So what is a virus, basically? I mean, you do hear, bacteria and other germs and those kind of things. But viruses are a different class of germs altogether. And why they're different is because that they can replicate, they can multiply, but the trouble is they can't replicate or multiply by themselves.
Okay.
They would need a host or a living cell to be able to multiply. So basically by themselves they don't. So they do need a host. And the host could be an animal, the host could be a human. And you see that these coronaviruses, they exist in animals, they are in humans. They are not new. By the way. I mean, it's a new in the sense that a new kind of virus has emerged in nature. So basically, what is a coronavirus? Amongst all different kind of viruses, which are very, very minuscule, and you would need an ultra microscope, electron microscopy, to be able to see these kind of viruses. You can't see it otherwise.
Right.
So what happens is that these viruses, they're unlike a cell that has a cell wall, is functionally autonomous, has all the required structures needed for the cell to multiply and so on. These viruses, actually, they have a genetic material, that is DNA.
DNA.
Okay? And this DNA is surrounded by protein or a lipid coat and so on.
Okay.
So like we humans, we all have a certain kind of morphology across the animal kingdom and so on. Similarly, these viruses have a certain kind of morphology.
Okay.
And this morphology is determined once you look through the picture of these viruses in an electron microscope, and you would see that you would see the genetic material surrounded by a protein or a lipid coat. Now, each virus, and there are a large number of viruses actually, each virus has a very unique kind of shape and size. And in case of coronavirus, corona refers to crown.
Okay.
So what happens is, on the periphery of this virus, there's a kind of crown. And this crown actually gives it a very typical kind of morphology. That's why it's named as coronavirus, because it has a crown.
Okay.
Now, there are lots of coronaviruses in the animal kingdom. They have been known for causing diarrhea and so on. And in humans, you may recall a decade back or so, there was a big SARS virus, which was again a coronavirus. It was a respiratory kind of virus. But what is different now is that this novel coronavirus, if I have to say. This virus has emerged. It's different from SARS. It is a coronavirus, but a different kind of coronavirus. And this virus basically is causing respiratory disease. It's spreading fast through human-to-human interaction. It will spread even much faster where there's a much more human density of the population. And so what happens is there's easy spread. I mean, when it's a person-to-person contact, these viruses through droplets and so on, they would come down and they would infect the other person. Now, mostly this new coronavirus, I know there's a lot of fear factor about it.
Right.
But essentially, it's a kind of not that harmful a virus. It is spreading pretty fast, there is no doubt. It causes flu-like kind of disease. It would have, I mean, like a common cold or something, sneezing, coughing.
So in terms of the symptoms, like you just pointed out, in terms of coughing or sneezing, if we were to point out the symptoms of coronavirus, what would it be? Like, are there certain essential symptoms that we could talk about?
Okay, it depends on the individual.
Okay.
In this sense, you see that healthy individuals, basically, they would have a mild form of the disease.
Okay.
They would have sneezing, coughing. Kind of thing. I mean, just like a common flu kind of symptoms. And normally these people would recover out of it. They have a robust immune system, so they would recover out of it. But those who are immunocompromised, that means their immune system is not strong because of some chronic disease conditions like diabetes and so on. I mean, those individuals, because their immune system is weak, they would have a more a severe kind of disease that could be even a pneumonia, and it could be even fatal.
Okay.
So in general, I would say that the mortality for this new coronavirus is not a worrisome factor at all.
Okay.
The morbidity is high in this case. I mean, large number of people are getting affected, as you pointed out, what's happening in China.
Right.
But the thing is, larger people you affect, I mean, you're likely to encounter lots of these immunocompromised individuals, and you would see in those situations that kind of fatalities or pneumonia and those kind of things. But mostly, most people would recover out of it. Healthy individuals should not worry about it.
Not worry about it. In terms of how it has affected different aspects, now it has affected trade in China, whereas events, you know, big companies are pulling out of big world events because, of course, again, it boils down to fear of being in places that's crowded. And also with the fact that in Edmonton today, 50 people have self-imposed volunteer to kind of put themselves into quarantine. So when you look at all of that, what are your thoughts and your key takeaways from that?
Well, my best advice would be that here in Canada, we have a very robust health system. Okay. The best is to consult your family physician. That's the first thing that one should do. Instead of engaging in any kind of self-medication
and Google
or Google and I mean, you see, it's much more complex than what you see on Google.
Right.
Google is a good information source. It may not be accurate, it may be accurate, but I think you do need a professional physician to look at this. Now, the self-quarantine kind of thing that you mentioned, it's more of a fear factor.
Right.
Okay. Now, quarantine may be okay for those individuals who have traveled to China, for example, and they have, there's a very great possibility during travel they have come in contact with infected individuals. They can acquire infection in those kind of situations. Those are the kind of people who should be quarantined for a while to protect the rest of the population here in Canada until the time that incubation period of the virus is taken care of and these individuals are healthy and happy. Now, well, if there are individuals with chronic disease conditions and so on, they should consult their family physician and their individual medical history to be able to be quarantined, to qualify for quarantine or not. Yes.
Okay. In terms of a lot of reports that we were talking about the virus, calling it a biological weapon, what are your comments about that?
Well, that's a little too far a stretch to comment at the moment. We need to know more about this virus before we can comment on that very candidly. Well, let me tell you, let us just look at in nature how the virus survives. You know, I mean, as you also pointed out, that for this coronavirus, we have not identified any animal reservoir
Right.
so far.
So we don't know where it's stemming from.
Yes, but we do know that, I mean, in Wuhan, where it originated, that people were in contact with animals and seafood and those kind of things. We do hear. But I think we need more candid scientific evidence to be able to say what exactly it is. We can't say that at this point of time. But having said that, you see, these viruses, I mean, of course, they are living beings. They have to survive in nature. We all have to survive in nature. This is an ecosystem. All these species, from viruses to humans, they have to survive. So what happens is naturally, why people are talking about biological warfare is, in nature, these viruses, they evolve over a period of time, and they evolve by genetic recombination. I mean, they take up a piece of DNA from one virus to the other and so on. And these pieces of DNA help generate a novel kind of virus. And most likely, this kind of novel coronavirus that we see in news at this time has either originated in nature through genetic recombination. That is one possibility. But then let me tell you that technology has advanced a lot. It is very easy these days to play with genes.
Right.
It's very easy. So you can artificially replicate the idea that happens naturally, that in nature these viruses, they undergo genetic recombination and involve new kinds of viruses. And similarly, you can mimic those kind of situations in the laboratory. You can introduce a gene or delete a gene. So you can modify these viruses very easily in the laboratory. And there's a possibility, and you know why? Actually, it's a positive thing. It is not a negative thing.
It's not a negative thing?
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because why would we manipulate the DNA in the laboratory? Our goal is to develop new vaccines.
Right.
We would like to have a vaccine that causes either a benign form of disease and no disease, for example. So we do need to have vaccines against these kind of infections. So this is a genetic approach that we use in laboratory to generate new vaccines. But this can also be exploited to take some virulent genes or harmful genes and put them in the virus to make the virus even more harmful.
Well, so where there's a good side, we're obviously going to combat with the bad side.
Yes.
So in terms of course, coming back to the precautions aspect of it, because I think the entire thing associated with coronavirus is fear. So when we're talking about precautions, what do you believe are probably the three most important things to keep in mind in terms of precautions?
I would even say just one thing, actually.
Just one thing?
Just one thing. Good hygiene.
Okay.
Washing your hands frequently.
Okay.
And to understand how this virus gets from one person to the other.
Right.
You see these viruses, I mean, when we sneeze or when we cough, I mean, these viruses, these droplets come out. And these droplets have those viruses. So if somehow you're in close contact with the people, and in that situation you are exposed to those droplets when somebody's sneezing or coughing, and there's a very good possibility of getting that kind of infection. So the best is to avoid that kind of very, very, very close person-to-person contact in some ways, and wash your hands frequently.
Okay.
With soap. Not just like that.
With soap.
Nicely, yes. There's nothing to fear. These viruses are normal. They're part of our ecosystem. They're part of our life. They exist in us also. So we should not worry too much. There are beneficial viruses and they're harmful. But this coronavirus, this is not as harmful. It is not as fatal as probably through media we try to think that this is probably.
It's probably because the number of cases reported in terms of the numbers that has been so large. So do you think the fear has also grown due to that? Because also we're living in the world of social media, right? So
well, it's social media and our economy, and this should tell us. I mean, this should tell us how closely we all are connected.
Right.
I mean, this is the fragility of the human ecosystem that we have today. But the point is this: in China, because of its large population, people are in very close contact. They're in close contact with the animals also. And let me say it this way, in case of the previous coronavirus, we know for sure that SARS virus, it originated from civet cats.
Okay.
Okay, and similarly, we had another kind of coronavirus that was observed in Middle East, and it was called Middle East coronavirus or SRS, Middle East Middle East SARS, in fact, and it came from camel, in fact.
From camels,
So
okay.
yes, so there's a possibility that this coronavirus probably may have some animal reservoir or origin, and it has spread pretty fast through humans. There's no doubt about this thing. Okay.
Okay.
But the mortality rate is not as high as of SARS.
SARS, right,
Okay?
when you compare to
but
that,
since
yeah.
you have large number of people affected, the chances of mortality of immunocompromised individuals or elderly or sick is relatively high.
So, Dr. Kaushik, one of the questions definitely that rises is the fact that when we have the flu or we have a cough or cold, in terms of any medical condition, we go to the doctor and we get a flu shot. So, how does that work in terms of coronavirus? What is the treatment look like for that, if you could tell us?
Well, yes, that's a very interesting question. I mean, everybody gets flu shots. Flu. I mean, you see what they're doing. It's a kind of vaccine. Okay, it's a kind of immunization. You see, if you really ask me, our body is our best doctor.
Right.
Okay, we have a very strong immune system within the body system, and this immune system takes care of us all the time, and that is why we are healthy and happy all the time. Okay, so it is only under very unusual circumstances. It's rarely we get infections or get sick. Most of the time we are healthy and happy. So flu shots, I mean, you see that flu, it's a virus, influenza virus actually, and this virus also undergoes genetic rearrangements, and this influenza virus can infect humans and animals, and these viruses go from animals to humans and humans to animals and so on, and they change all the time. In nature they evolve, they undergo lots of what we call mutations. Okay.
Yes.
So and when they undergo these kind of mutations, what happens is they generate a new kind of virus. And why do they do that? Is because viruses have to survive in nature. Now these viruses, you see, when we infect humans, I mean, they need a host to survive in nature. So, for example, these flu viruses or influenza viruses that affect humans, so after some time, I mean, the human immune system acts and becomes strong and prevents the infection with that virus, and that virus cannot survive because it can't infect humans now, because most of the people have become immune in some ways. So what they do is they mutate, and through this mutation they generate a novel kind of virus, and that is why we get these flu shots every year after year, because each time a new kind of virus emerges, and we scientists make predictions that probably this year this new kind of strain would come and infect us. And that's how we generate our vaccination strategy or immunization strategy in some ways. So for coronavirus, unfortunately for this new coronavirus, we really don't have a vaccine.
Okay.
I mean, it is a little too new a virus. We need to understand a bit more about this virus. We need to know the structure of this virus, and we need to know on the structure what is important in that structure that we can exploit to develop a new vaccine,
right.
So that we can immunize people so they don't get this coronavirus. So vaccine probably would come in near future, but for the moment I would say in general there are very few antiviral drugs that are used, and we use those for those kind of very, very severe or serious kind of infections. Normally we don't use them. So I am hopeful that if this new coronavirus spreads as it is spreading at this point of time, in that situation we would probably be developing a vaccine, and we need to know the structure of the virus. A complete DNA analysis would be made, and we would be in a position to develop a vaccine. Yes,
okay.
But that's for future, not now.
Not right now. Okay, yes. That was in terms of the treatment. Now the other sector that is definitely hurting because of the coronavirus is the economy.
Right.
So what can we do about that, and what are your thoughts about the same?
I would tend to think we should not worry too much about this.
Okay.
It's a transitory phase at this
okay.
point of time. The only concern is that China is a big hub of the world economy in some ways, and if the population is sick over there, affects the productivity of the industry and so on. So, but I think that this would be a very transitory kind of situation. It's not something that's going to last too long.
Too long. Okay. Yes. And before we let you go, anything that you would like to tell our viewers in particular about the fact that, like we've repeated several times, it is associated with fear. So anything that you would like to tell them on the basis of that, and of course the virus?
Well, all I would say is to have no fear whatsoever. Viruses exist around us. I mean, we usually get common cold and flu and things like that. So we should probably avoid thinking that this SARS virus is deadly. I mean, there are much more deadlier viruses than this SARS virus that we have, or this new coronavirus that we have. So what I would say is simply keep good hygiene, wash your hands frequently with soap and water, and avoid very close interaction because the virus spreads through human-to-human contact. We don't know the animal source as yet. Once we know, we would certainly share it with you.
Well, Dr. Kaushik, thank you so much for joining us in our studios. We're pretty sure all our viewers are going to definitely make note of the fact that you said, number one, no fear. Number two, to follow great hygiene habits. And I think third, importantly, would also be with the fact to educate yourselves about anything that you are reading regarding the coronavirus. So thank you once again for joining us. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Well, that was Dr. Kaushik Azad talking to us about the fact that everything related to coronavirus stems from fear, and what is it that you can do to ensure that you combat that fear? Continue looking at VNN Canada. This is Nivedana Prabhu signing off.